About 2 centuries before the birth of Jesus, the ancient Israelites were governed as part of the Seleucid Empire. The Seleucid Empire was one of the remaining states claimed by Alexander the Great's generals, and it covered much of the area of modern Syria, Israel, and now Lebanon. The ancient Israelites initially welcomed Alexander the Great's conquest on a certain level because he tolerated different religions and cultures. He himself, whenever he went to one of the countries he conquered, changed his clothes. He wore whatever the costumes were of the local people, so meaning that he would embrace their culture. Over the course of 75 years of Greek rule, however, ancient Israel became progressively more and more Greek. The Seleucid kings became progressively more strident in their faith, and they began to impose their Greek religion, worshiping Zeus and many other deities, upon the ancient Israelites. Eventually, it all came to a head when the king of Syria, King Antiochus III, ordered that the Jewish temple in Jerusalem be consecrated as a Greek pagan temple. Statues were placed in the temple, and the place was desecrated for Jewish worship. Jews were compelled to make sacrifices to the Greek gods and to eat non-kosher foods. Under the leadership of a priest from a remote town, Mattathias, and his sons, a war of national liberation was fought and won. The cost in terms of human life was incredible. More than half the population of ancient Israel died during that war of liberation. At the end of the war, the people consecrated the temple in Jerusalem. The small amount of consecrated oil they found for the lamp lasted 8 nights, when it should have lasted only 1. The people were desperate for some sign of God's presence in the moment of their victory. They took this as a miracle. As miracles go, this one is rather small. Years ago, The Daily Show with Jon Stewart segued into the Colbert Report by having repartee at the end of the Daily Show between Stewart and Colbert. Stephen Colbert appeared on one of these. It was around this time of year, and he told Jon Stewart about the miracle of Christmas, saying something like, "A virgin gives birth to a boy after being told by a glowing angel. A massive star appears above the stable where the child is born, guiding wise men to give presents. Choirs of angels descend from heaven, telling shepherds to go there. Tell me about the miracle of Hanukkah, John." Jon Stewart looks down at his table and says something like, "We had a great victory. We celebrated by lighting an oil lamp. The oil lamp lasted longer than we thought it would." Hanukkah, though, is not about that oil lamp. The story about the oil lamp lasting longer than imagined does appear in the Talmud, but it does not appear in the passage in Maccabees, which is earlier, that said the 8 days of celebration as a religious rite. Hanukkah is not really about the oil lamp. Hanukkah is about freedom. Most importantly, it is about religious freedom. The ancient Israelites fought against the Greeks and their own people to restore their faith, unadulterated by foreign princes and ideas. They did so because they just wanted to be themselves, worshiping their God as their tradition told them. Similarly, freedom of religion is sacred to most Americans. Our Constitution ensures that the federal Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. This sounds pretty good, but in those days when it was written, this was a promise made by the federal government. It did not regulate the 13 original colonies. In fact, most of the colonies had established religions sustained by state taxes. The Anglican faith was the church of state in Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. The churches descended from Puritanism were dominant in Massachusetts, Connecticut, and New Hampshire. To hold office in Connecticut and Massachusetts, one had to be a Christian. To hold office in the time of the Constitution, one had to be a Protestant. In Delaware, to hold office, one had to be Trinitarian, believing in the deity who was co-equally Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. In those places, taxes were levied by the states to support the local churches. Church and state were one on the local level at least. In Massachusetts, this situation was not changed until 1832, when the Commonwealth legislature was the last state government to break the link between church and state, doing so largely because of the rift between the Unitarians and the Congregationalists over who should receive the tax monies to support their churches. It is surprising to some of us that the Unitarian churches in Massachusetts were the last religious institutions to receive tax revenues. Can you believe that? I mean, us? Well, there we were, we and the Congregationalists, and it depended on town by town which church, whether it was Unitarian or Congregationalist, got the tax monies. It was determined by which one of them, the two churches had broken apart, which one had the most members at the time, most of the time. When the United States Constitution was written more than 2 centuries ago, the delegates worried that no religious language or restriction would enable anyone would prohibit anyone from becoming president. One delegate bemoaned that due to the liberality of the Constitution's provisions, a Turk, a Jew, a Roman Catholic, and what is worse than all, a Universalist may be president of the United States. Of course, so far only one non-Protestant has been elected president. Two non-Protestants have been elected president, unless one includes Barack Obama, who is secretly a Muslim, according to many unreliable sources. This division marks the debate over church and state. This land was populated by Europeans seeking to practice the free practice of their religion. They sought open space to be Quakers, Baptists, Calvinists, Lutherans, Mennonites, to name a few. Years ago, a European woman who was a member of a congregation I served asked me, "Why is there a church on every street corner in America?" I replied, "Because people from your country kicked us out." Jews, Lutherans, Quakers, Baptists, Calvinists, Pietists, many of the colonies were populated by people who had nowhere else to go. They treasured their faith and came to this continent seeking the religious freedom to be who they were, worshiping God as they felt called. The concept of church and state division was slowly incorporated into American life. It came from the pressure to permit people from one state to move to another without losing their right to practice their religion. It also became a practical reality that if the United States were to accomplish manifest destiny, that calling that people in the 19th century had to take and carve out the nation from other people's land, from sea to shining sea, that could only be accomplished by European immigration from many different places. Permitting states to establish churches would create too much confusion and make nation building very difficult. So they settled upon the idea, supported by the courts, that everyone should have freedom of religion. In practice, though, governments did show preference for religious ideas and institutions. They had the Bible, usually the King James Version, read in the public schools. They gave tax money for religious denominations to build public universities. They demanded that people swear oaths to the state and in courts to God. They disenfranchised people they considered of the wrong faith or of no faith at all. Given this disdain for freedom of religion, it is a wonder that it ever became a national ideal. For too many religious bodies, freedom of religion meant freedom for themselves and no one else. As former president of the American Unitarian Association and also president of the United States, William Howard Taft once put it, the Puritans came to this country to establish freedom of their religion and not the freedom of anyone else's religion. This is the dilemma. We can live in a free society, respecting freedom of religion, while still asking the government to function. On what basis is our government founded, if not religious principle? In fact, the government enacts laws, much as it did long ago, with the religious beliefs of the majority of people in this nation functioning as the law of the land. Why the furor over marriage equality? Why do children in public schools not receive real sexuality education in an age of disease and moderate teenage pregnancy rates? Why the opposition to women having control over their own bodies? Why were high school biology textbooks in my home state of Georgia required for a while to have stickers glued to their covers with the words, "Evolution is only a theory"? The only honest answer is religion. Religion still shapes the nature of American society and the laws that are enforced. When we have laws forbidding religious preference or preferring one religion over another, the reality is that many of the laws reflect a conservative Christian bias. Adequate sexuality education cannot be offered in the schools of this nation if such schools wish to receive federal funding. The basic mechanics are taught, but contraception is forbidden to be taught to our children. While we might prefer that children delay sexual activity until adulthood, for those who do not, no public school will have taught them the ways not to become pregnant or even prevent the spread of disease. The teaching of Darwin's theory of evolution, though, goes to the core of the church and state debate, because evolution contradicts a literal narrative of the biblical account of Genesis. It does have theological implications. Yet it is the opinion of the vast majority of the scientific community that this process of natural selection and mutation explains the development of life, including human life on this planet. By telling children about this biological idea, we do risk threatening their faith if they believe in a literal version of Genesis. Yet, are we willing to live in ignorance, to protect everyone's faith. When Unitarian Universalists are at our best, we speak and act in ways that affirm and promote a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Our sources of faith include humanist teachings which counsel us to heed the guidance of reason and the results of science, and warn us against idolatries of the mind and spirit. Our religion demands not only spiritual growth, but actions that preserve the freedom of religion and freedom from religion for all people. This nation is not ready for that yet, though. Our laws still reflect the religious values of another era. This will change over time, but only if we persist. Religious freedom is threatened today. There has been a rise in anti-Semitism in recent years, with public figures expressing support for Nazi ideology and increased violence against Jewish people and institutions. On Friday night, a Jewish man in New York City was attacked by someone for being Jewish. His assailant kept giving a campaign slogan for someone who was considering becoming president of the United States. A musician. People are more willing to express publicly intolerant ideas about Jewish people and other religious minorities than at any other time in my life. And sometimes they're resorting to violence. The talking heads on television, internet, and radio are fanning the fires of religion with impunity. Their hate speech is protected. And as time progresses, it seems to be becoming more and more intense. Witness a former president of the United States welcoming into his home 3 people who have made anti-Semitic statements and expressed admiration for Adolf Hitler. And the former president ate with them. And the former president has not said anything publicly condemning their beliefs nor explaining his actions. When those who wield power or who have wielded power do not oppose religious bigotry and the threat that it represents to religious freedom, their silence can only mean that they assent to religious hatred. One cannot believe in religious freedom and also associate with Nazis. It is surprising to me that when I was growing up in the Deep South, I do not remember anyone ever saying anything anti-Semitic. And I do not recall anyone ever suggesting religious intolerance beyond, we don't like that religion or something like that. There was never a statement like, let's go burn a church down or let's attack people for their religion. Race was the preferred prejudice in the South, the one that overruled all others. And I know from experience by talking with rabbis when I served a church in Georgia that race was also a problem in some of the synagogues too. Racism. I had to move to the Northeast, in my experience, to encounter anti-Semitism for the first time, sometimes spoken in whispers. As Unitarian Universalists, our community would probably encounter more persecution if more people knew about us. You know, it's true. We're new. The Jews have been around for thousands of years. We've only existed for about 200. Our openness to many different religious beliefs and perspectives and our advocacy for equality for all people are counter to what many Americans believe. Our defining principle affirms the free and open search for truth and meaning. We are dedicated to religious freedom in our congregations and in society at large. Like the ancient Israelites, we are engaged in a struggle to live our faith. Hanukkah commemorates the victory by the Maccabees, those rebellious warriors, over the Greco-Syrians. Now, when I was a child, I thought that the Maccabees mentioned in the Bible were Scottish. I really wondered how Scotsmen wound up in ancient Israel. The Maccabees, though, were victorious over the oppressive religion of the Greeks because they knew their faith. They knew they weren't Scottish. Scotland didn't exist. And were willing to persist, even in the face of death, to practice what they held to be most important. On this day, the day before the first night of Hanukkah, it seems fitting to value our religious liberty and to close with this 1790 reading from George Washington, which is often referred to as "To the Jews." Washington was reassuring a Rhode Island synagogue that fines for breaking the Christian Sabbath were a thing of the past, and he ends his statement to that Rhode Island synagogue with these words: "All possess alike liberty of conscience and immunities of citizenship. It is now no more that toleration is spoken of as if it was by the indulgence of one class of people that another enjoyed the exercise of their inherent natural rights. For happily the government of the United States, which gives to bigotry no sanction, to persecution no assistance, requires only that they who live under its protection should demean themselves as good citizens. May the children of the stock of Abraham, who dwell in this land, continue to merit and enjoy the goodwill of the other inhabitants, while everyone shall sit in safety under his own vine and fig tree, and there shall be none to make him afraid. We have abundant reason to rejoice that in this land the light of truth and reason has triumphed over the power of bigotry and superstition, and that every person may here worship God according to the dictates of his own heart. In this enlightened age and in this land of equal liberty, it is our boast that a man's religious tenets will not forfeit the protection of the laws. So be it. Blessed be. Amen.